We need to see people treating dark-skinned Black women with kindness and care and compassion and concern and gentleness and tenderness and affection. We also need to see representations of that. Hey YouTube, thank you for tuning in to watch the replay of my weekly Instagram Live. I'm Dr. Sarah Webb, author, speaker, consultant, and coach who's known around the world as an expert on colorism. Check the description box below if you'd like to dive deeper. All the links are there. Now, if something you hear today resonates deep within your soul, or if you just like it or find it funny, make sure you hit the like button. It's like a virtual high five. And if you'd like to see more videos, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Much love. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Monday night live stream with Colorism Healing. Yours truly, your host, Dr. Sarah Webb. So I did not preview the topic for tonight because I finally settled on it today. And that topic is being a single, dark-skinned Black girl. So this is a topic that I've been wanting to talk about for a while, but I didn't really know what I was going to say about it or what my, point was. But also it's a very vulnerable topic for me, so I kind of just was waiting it out, that kind of thing. But I can't ignore my desire, the pull in me to talk about this issue. So I'm gonna go ahead and pin that comment now. And in the meantime, say hello if you're joining in the chat. If you're joining me live, be sure to just send a wave or say hi. Let me know where you're watching from, where you're located. I always like to know where folks are tuning in from, especially if this is your first time. So hey, Akosua. Yeah, I was like, it's time to start talking about that. Yeah, so let me try to pin it. I have to type it out. Topic. Okay, so then let me see if I can pin it. Pin comment. All right, so let's see. Hey, Akosua. Hey, Black Knight 0626.2 says, Running Man, still recovering, missing running. It is my meditation and motion. Absolutely. I'm writing like a affirmation workbook, and I talked about running in one of the sections, and I mentioned how for me it's like a moving meditation. So yep, same thing here. Atlanta, elegant, fly, fancy. Okay, screen name, I see you. Love it. Hey, books by Black women, books by BW. I assume the BW is Black woman. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm glad you are here. Hello, K-Drama Oma, aka Michelle. Good to see you. One of the golden oldies there. Yeah, so I figured I should start pinning my topics too, because people come into the lives at all different points of the conversation, and I always try to stop and remind people about what we're talking about, but it's easy just to have it in the comment. Thank you, Uzima Dance Fitness, for buying the first badge of the night. Thank you so much. Hi from New Jersey. I'm Tia. I've been stalking your YouTube videos, and I'm thankful for all I'm learning from you. Yes, continue to stalk the YouTube videos, Tia. Thank you. And your screen name sounds really interesting, so I will definitely be checking out your account or your YouTube channel to see what this dance fitness is all about. Sounds really cool. Keep shining. Thank you, Afro Herb Apothecary _shop. Books by BW says you are 100% right. Yes, we love books by Black women. Eileen Nobri says hugs from Mozambique. Yes, hugs to you too, Mozambique. I love it because there's always at least one person who drops into the chat that they are, you know, international. So I always have at least one of my international folks watching every week, and I love it. You might be the first person from Mozambique though. So even more special. Uzima Dance Fitness says, fitness for us, by us. Dance that centers and honors all things Black and African culture. Yes. Are you familiar with Rashida Conway Miller of Messy Movement? I know she's going to be like have a guest appearance on Lizzo's Watch Out for the Big Girls, all about like finding dancers, you know, backup dancers for Lizzo. I think it's going to be on Amazon. So yeah, she's really cool. She's here on Instagram at Rashida Conway Miller. I'm not sure what her actual handle is. Says Uzima Dance Fitness says, I'm going to look her up. Yeah, she's really cool, and the body positive focus is very necessary and brilliant and beautiful. Hi, Mike Kevin. Good evening to you too. I love this little tribe that we got going on here on the live stream. If you are not watching live, welcome on YouTube and or the podcast. I do these every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. I still want to say Central. I'm so used to being on Central time, but I'm on Eastern time for now. And I do save these on YouTube and the podcast. So even if you have to leave early, if you can't watch the whole live, it'll be on my IGTV, YouTube and podcast. And if you ever miss one, if you want to go back and look at the archives, you can definitely find them there as well. So again, even though I've pinned the topic, tonight I am starting a conversation because I'm definitely not going to get to everything in one night. I'm starting a conversation about what it's like to be single as a dark-skinned Black girl or dark-skinned Black woman. I'm starting with the past, right? So I'm going to open up the curtain a little bit and let y'all into my personal experiences when it comes to being single. But I want to start with looking at the past, right? Before I get into like current day stuff or more recent developments. But as I mentioned, this is definitely something I've alluded to in recent posts, right? I remember I had this one video where I was talking about in my live on internalized colorism, how for me, I internalized the idea that, you know, guys would not be able to see my beauty or see my worth because I was dark skinned and they were colorists, right? So I've kind of started talking about it, but I've also just been thinking about the cultural pressure for women in general. So not just dark skinned Black women. Really, it's something that I think all women in particular feel, especially in heteronormative contexts, right? The stigma of, you know, oh, never finding a man, or you're never going to get married, right? So that's all stuff that I'm going to start getting into today. Hopefully y'all find it interesting. So as I mentioned, even though this is a somewhat vulnerable topic for me, like I have butterflies in my stomach just thinking about talking about it. But I also know that I can't ignore the pull in my heart to talk about it. And it's one of my core values is to be courageous. And last week when I talked about my number one secret to being confident, I talked about how courage is the gateway to confidence. So if I ever want to feel more confident talking about this topic, I have to have the courage to start, right? I have to lead by example. I can't just talk the talk. I have to walk the walk. So if I'm telling other people to be courageous, I also have to make sure I continue to do that and continuing to push myself. And so I've gotten comfortable talking about colorism because at one time that was scary for me. Talking about colorism made my palms sweaty, right? It gave me a lot of anxious feelings. And now, after over a decade, I'm a lot less afraid to talk about colorism. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna just say the stuff that gotta be said. And so now I'm like, I feel myself continuing to grow and stretch and evolve. And like, this is a new area, definitely still related to colorism, but it's a particular component of colorism that I'm less confident talking about. So y'all are witnessing the evolution of Dr. Webb right before your eyes. So with this topic, I am just starting this week, so I don't have like this big manifesto, right? I was like, I don't have like major profound takeaways. Also, this is definitely not dating advice. Not at all. So I apologize if you're a dark-skinned woman who is looking for my advice on how to find someone or how to date. You ain't gonna get that kind of video from me. This is mostly gonna be like a critique of the patriarchy. I'm just letting you know up front, so if you wanna hop off this live while you can do that. But I wanna start by talking about how we are conditioned to pine for romance. Also, I know some of what I say is going to seem controversial to people, and I know there are people who will adamantly disagree with some of the things I say. That's fine. Like, this is not in any way a judgment. Just like when I talk about my hair, it's an option, right? It's one way of living and being in the world. It's not a judgment on people who choose a different lifestyle, that kind of thing. I just have to say that. Like, I'm happy for marriage. If I get married someday, I'm not like, oh, I hate romance. That's not what this is about. But I do think that we are conditioned to pine for it. And when we look at the media, so I'll start with the media, every TV show, every movie, even children's movies, even things that are, marketed towards children, Disney is like the penultimate culprit of this. They really focus on romance. Either the romance is the main plot of the movie or the TV show, or it's like an important subplot. And one thing I noticed too is that it's not just, this romantic relationship is portrayed as an everyday part of life, just like going to work is a part of human existence, or, having friendships or being someone's child is just a part of what humans do, right? But the portrayal of romance in these stories makes it seem like it's the holy grail of human existence, right? It's not just, people partner together and they decide to live their lives together. It's, I am incomplete without this component in my life, right? Or this is the dream this is the highest aspiration I could possibly have for myself, right? And again, I do believe, especially as I get more into astrology and that sort of thing, I do believe that in this lifetime, some people's destiny is, to pursue romance. But I think culturally speaking, we try to make it seem like it should be everybody's destiny. And I don't agree with that. But there is the layer of colorism that comes into that, right? So you're growing up. I grew up watching these movies and these TV shows that, just made romance and getting the guy or having the guy choose you was just like it. Like, that was it. But in seeing those stories, I never saw people who look like me in the story. Right? So then there's this like interesting tension where a dark-skinned girl, especially a dark-skinned Black girl, is conditioned to see these stories as like the holy grail of human existence, but never seeing anyone who looks like her in those stories. And so you're like, okay, this is something I should want, but is it even possible for me? Right? And so there's this like inner tension. And then you think about things like music. And anyone who knows me knows I love me some music. And most music is even more obsessed with romance and love than movies, right? Like, the themes are always, I want somebody, I'm happy I got somebody, I lost my somebody, and now I'm sad. It's like, is every song a love song, or a song about the loss of love, or a song about like wishing for love, right? Now, I still love music, and I will still listen to all the songs that are about love and romance as I'm giving this critique, right? Doesn't mean I'm gonna stop listening to music. But I think it's interesting how that is what's so marketable, right? But even in music videos, for example, if you're watching an R&B love song and there's a music video about it, do you see yourself represented in that particular love story? Even when we're looking at quote unquote Black love stories, again, whether they're actually created by Black people or not, it's seen as a Black love story. Speaking of that, slight tangent, living in Harlem is wonderful. And I was thinking about doing a series or like a vlog called Finding Black Love in Harlem, because there's this really awesome Black owned gift shop in Harlem, not far from where I'm at now. And in the little placards that they have out front are like, they have James Baldwin quotes on them, and they have a photo from a movie poster from If Beale Street Could Talk, you know, and so that was one of the love stories, the rare love stories that featured a dark-skinned woman, and they, you know, have black love written on it or whatever. I just thought that was a beautiful portrayal. So anyway, I think it's when it does happen, when you do see someone who looks like you as a dark-skinned black woman being the center of a love story, you kind of like cling to that representation and you like really cherish it. That's how I felt. Like the one or two like dark-skinned girl love stories that I've seen, and they didn't really happen until like I was an adult. Like I could watch those over and over again. That's why I could watch Issa Rae movies and Insecure over and over again. And If Beale Street Could Talk, like those kinds of things. The other thing I was thinking as I look at my notes is how in media representation, not only is the primary female love interest, not only is she most often lighter skinned than the man, if she's even black, she's not even black, or, you know, she's mixed race or biracial or something like that. But not only is that most common, but when you do see dark-skinned women portrayed in those movies or those TV shows, for example, oftentimes she's the enemy, or she's like the other woman, or she's the problematic ex-wife that the guy is divorcing to find true love, right? And so it's this contrast of, you know, not only do we position the lighter-skinned person as the desirable one, but we also have like the dark-skinned best friend who's not desirable. Coming to America, my favorite example of colorism in this exact context, right? You have the very, very light-skinned sister who is the desirable one, and then you have the dark-skinned sister who's less desirable and who is just portrayed as sort of being like desperate and being willing to do anything to chase after men who don't want her. Well, as the light-skinned girl is kind of like having men chase after her that she doesn't want, right? And so it's just an extreme juxtaposition of the desirability of the light-skinned woman and the, you know, sort of misrepresentation, caricature of the darker-skinned sister. So I think the media definitely conditions us to just fantasize and prioritize romantic relationships. Before a dark-skinned black girl, you don't even see yourself represented in that thing that you're being conditioned to prioritize. But I also want to say, of course, that the idealization of romantic relationships and marriage is not just perpetuated in the media. We all know that the people around us in our everyday lives, like the actual humans we come in contact with, also perpetuate this idea. And it's what I've found is that for especially for a cis het woman, and even just for even like a transgender woman, I think this holds true as well. It's the ultimate social validation to be in a relationship for women. And I think my mom was talking to me about this one time where she overheard like two mothers, like two older women talking about their daughters, and like the first question, like imagine the women hadn't seen each other in a while, so they're catching up, like, oh, and how's your daughter, what's she doing, is she seeing anyone, is she in a relationship, right? So I think my mom noted how interesting it was that was the marker for each of the women as to how their daughter was doing, right? But I can't even begin to really go into detail about all the things that people say and do and how they act and behave around you or towards you if you're single. Y'all already know. Let me pause before I share some examples and see what these comments are talking about, because this is kind of new territory for colorism healing. Let's see. I grew up feeling like marriage is for light-skinned women, modern formulas. See? Ugh, I hate it. Yes, codependency is glamorized these days. Oh, Queen James. Queen James, you said it, fam. that on a t-shirt. Codependency is glamorized, cause, whoo, I'm gonna make that a part 2. That's how I'm gonna start my part 2. It's like, is it even love though? Like, is it even love, or is it just codependency? Ooh, cause yeah, we oftentimes, I feel the same way. I feel like a lot of times what people label as love is actually codependency. I think that is definitely something we need to talk more about as a culture. Yeah. Trey Lorraine, hey, how you doing? Vulnerability requires bravery, so thank you for you. Thank you. So sweet. Okay, and then I saw some other ones. Elegant Fly Fancy says, when I was a teenager, I used to get so depressed watching music videos. They never used to put dark-skinned girls in any other videos. Exactly. Yeah. And these are Black videos. I mean, it's just so obvious. Bronx Tale, Modern Form. I do remember Bronx Tale. I remember posting something on Facebook about, this issue about representation of dark-skinned women in movies. And someone recommended A Bronx Tale to me. I was surprised. I was so shocked because it's like an older film. Bronx Tale was really surprising to me, but I liked it. Hey, Mr. Camille. Iconic. The only music video I've seen was I Need Love by LL Cool J. Interesting. I remember Marcus Houston, All Because of You. He had a dark-skinned girl in that video. And I was like, oh, I kept rewatching the video. I was like, oh, she's dark-skinned. This is petty too, but I noticed that even when the dark-skinned girl was in the video, she was always not directly in front of the camera. It's weird, but I noticed okay, I would be trying to see the dark-skinned girl's face in the video, and they just wouldn't. They would just show her arm, right, or show her silhouette, or show her shadow. It's you could tell she was dark-skinned, but they weren't focusing on her face. She wasn't, I think, central the way a lot of the light-skinned video actresses were. Smart Girl says The Princess and the Frog is another example. Coming to America is the worst. The new one isn't even a little better. I noticed that the new one had a dark-skinned daughter or something like that. I haven't tried to watch it though, just because I'm scarred from the original one. Blessed to Be a Blessing 10 says, yes, the only love music video I've seen with the dark-skinned girl being the desirable one is I Need Love by LL Cool J. Smart Girl Simone says, unfortunately for women, our value and status comes from having a man. I'm getting very tired of that. Yep. Yes. All right, let me keep going. So some of the things, and you all have a warehouse of your own examples, I already know, but very common ones that we might all recognize. So when are you going to get married? Don't you think it's time to cut the cake? Someone actually mentioned that to me. I didn't know what they meant. I was like, cut the cake? What you talking about? And so I asked somebody else and said, oh, they mean, a wedding cake. And I was like, oh, okay. Anyway, one of my favorites, you need a man. So people usually say you need a man though. So it's also how we police women, right? So if you're too opinionated, or you're too outspoken, or you're in any way showing up in a way that the other person disapproves of, it's oh, you need a man. And people will say that oh, you won't be so angry if you had a man. You wouldn't be so opinionated if you had a man. You wouldn't be so out. You wouldn't care so much about this political issue if you had a man. You wouldn't be talking about colorism if you had a man. And then on the flip side is when people say, oh, I got a man. So let me tell you why this is an interesting thing to say. One, you'll often hear it in response as a defense mechanism that a lot of women throw out as to why they're okay, or why they are good, why they're fine. Oh, I'm doing good. I'm happy. I got a man. I got one. And the insinuation is and other people don't. And I mentioned in one of my earlier posts that I heard a very popular YouTuber allude to the fact, it wasn't even an allusion. She directly said, I haven't been talking about colorism as much. I don't too much talk about this issues like this anymore because I got a man, And her tone of voice was like so prideful. Like, oh, because, I got a man. Like, I'm good, right? Like, it's a flex. It's a flex for so many people. And I understand, I don't know, maybe it should be, I don't know. For whatever reason, being in a relationship could be your flex. That's fine. But to then use it as a flex in explaining why you don't talk about colorism is so problematic. It's extremely problematic. It sets us back. Those of us who actually do the work to educate people about colorism, it really sets us back because that is one of the number one criticisms people launch at us to invalidate or to discredit us who talk about colorism. Is you're only doing it because you want a man. You're just mad because you don't have nobody, because nobody wants to date you, because that's why you're going to always be single. Nobody wants y'all, ha, ha, ha. And so I encourage women that even if you're in a relationship, not to use that to buffer you from criticism when you're talking about colorism, because it validates the argument, right? And so when women say like, oh, well, I have a boyfriend or I'm married, so that's not the reason I'm talking about colorism, it kind of gives credibility to the trolls, right? And leaves room for like a woman like me who talks about colorism and who cannot pull my fiance out of my back pocket and be like, haha, gotcha, I got a fiance, so that's not why I'm talking about colorism. Like, so many of us who talk about colorism don't have that defense, don't have that as a shield. And so when people do use it as a shield, it makes those of us who don't have that shield even more vulnerable to those criticisms and attacks. So just a little side note there. Speaking of which, I've gotten these a lot too, as like an outspoken, opinionated, sort of like independent, like just doing my own thing, wearing my hair the way I want to wear it. I don't like to cook, whatever, like all the things, dressing in a unique fashion sense. Men don't like women who XYZ. Our men don't want a woman who does this or does that, right? Or even other women, right? You get this from men and women. I remember I was like 18. I was a senior in high school, and there was this like adult man in his like mid-20s. And he was like, Sarah, you're going to intimidate men someday. You're really going to intimidate some men one day. Oh, gosh. So that's problematic for a few reasons. But my response was like, no, I don't intimidate men. I intimidate boys. And I don't even like that response. Like now looking back, I was like, that was not a great response. But it was a smart aleck response. And it was the way I thought back then. But yeah, this constant like social policing of how women show up. And the penalty for not showing up the way we think you should is that you're going to be single. And again, it's the underlying assumption that that's the worst thing that could happen to you. Right? Like, you don't want to do that because then you'll never find it. Then you'll always be single. It's like wishing somebody to hell, right? Like, you're going to burn in hell, so don't do that. So it's simultaneously like, make somebody afraid to do something, tell them they're going to be single forever. Make a woman afraid to not straighten her hair, you're going to be single forever. Make a woman afraid to cut her hair. I remember when cutting all my hair off, it's like, men don't like that. You're not going to find anybody who wants a woman with a shaved head. It's, ugh. It makes me, gives me the shivers. And then my last example is I saw this a lot, but there are like a prevalence of like singles groups or like books or classes or organizations like for single people, but they're all about how to not be single. And I think that's a really interesting thing. I'm just like making a note of that, how few of these like singles groups are actually about living life as a single person. They are 95% about how to one day soon not be single anymore. So yeah, this is just it's a deep part of our culture, I know. And like dating, being in a relationship, being married, all the things, fun, great, exciting. But I kind of wish it was seen as just like a part of life, right? Like, okay, it's just something you do. It doesn't have to be the end all be all for so many people. And then I want to talk about more explicitly other ways that colorism influences your life or can influence the dating dynamic if you're a dark-skinned Black woman specifically. In the US in particular and around the globe, it's being a dark-skinned person who's not Black, like being a dark-skinned Indian woman, for example, it's a different kind of experience because you'll have, like in the US, for example, a lot of Black men who don't want to date dark-skinned Black women would date dark-skinned non-Black women. So I think that's an interesting dynamic. But there is a lot of this does have to do with patriarchy and misogyny. And I know that, doesn't make people comfortable necessarily. But it's true. This is what I was saying. So again, reflecting on my early life and how even before girls are actually old enough to date, people are making judgments about their future dateability, their future potential on the marriage market, right? And so I've spoken about how my mom tells me this story that when I was around 5, my sister and I were younger. I was 5, she was about 7. And some older women, like some older relatives, extended relatives, were talking about how my sister's going to grow up and break some hearts one day. She's really going to break hearts. You have to watch out for her. She's going to be a heartbreaker. And just the assumption, even before children can even think about dating or romance, adults are projecting their own beliefs and standards of okay, these girls are going to be heartbreakers. They're going to be desirable. They're going to get married easily. And these girls should prepare themselves to be single, right? And these girls are going to have to work really hard to compensate for their lack of desirability, right? You're not going to win any points for being cute, so you should really learn how to cook. You should really learn how to cook and clean because, you got to bring something to the table. If anybody's been watching the TikTok trend of making fun of these male podcasters who talk about, these male TikTokers who what do you bring to the table as women? It's a whole thing. So the whole thing is really entertaining and informative if you are interested. But even at 5, I understood why those women were saying that. I understood what they were saying. Right? Even at 5, I understood what they meant when they said my lighter-skinned sister would break some hearts. And they were not saying anything about me. At 5, I was completely clear about that. And so we project and condition and teach either directly or indirectly children these kinds of beliefs and attitudes very early on. And my mom heard me say, well, that's because she's light-skinned, right? So not only did I understand it, but I understood it well enough to name it. That, okay, you see the little light-skinned girls in the family and you tell them, oh, you're so pretty, and they're the daughter that we're going to marry off first, right? Thinking about arranged marriages in India, for example. And then the dark-skinned girls, you're telling them, well, you can't marry a Black man because you're so dark that you can't marry a Black man. You have to marry a white man or, a non-Black man so that your children don't come out dark like you. And again, telling this to girls before they're even thinking about dating. It's just something that you just, as the adult, projecting onto them. And as I mentioned, as I come to a close for this particular part of the conversation. As I mentioned, I internalized all these messages, and I was like, yeah, ain't nobody gonna be checking for me because they all colorist and stuff like that. And and then I went natural, and I was like, I'm dark skinned, got a wide nose, natural hair, I'm opinionated, all the things. And I was like, okay, yeah, they're not men in particular, and then I say black guys in particular. I wanted to clarify that because obviously black men are not the only people who are colorists. White men can be colorists. Asian men can be colorists, like indigenous men, like all the people. Oh, and women too. Like obviously women are colorists. But I specify that for me it was black men in particular that I understood as having a filter of colorism, having a colorism filter, because that's who I have been conditioned to look to as potential partners, as potential mates, right? So the way I grew up, in the environment I grew up in, I was not even like considering men of other races as potential partners or potential marriage partners. And that's just because of how I was raised in the context of where I grew up, right? Where I didn't see that and no one was really encouraging that or talking about that. And so it was almost just like a non-starter for me to even consider that, like, oh yeah, other guys are colorist and racist too. And so for me, it was seeing it and being impacted more by colorism from black men than even racism from white guys. Because for a lot of white guys, I was just merely invisible. Like, it was like, okay, do you even exist kind of thing. Whereas for a lot of the black guys, they would go out of their way. I was hyper visible, right, amongst black men and black guys. And a lot of times they would go out of their way to reject me, even when I was not approaching them or making any advances towards them, or they'd go out of their way to say things like, oh, I only date light-skinned girls. And I was like, nobody asked you though. Or, I don't date dark-skinned girls. Like just a lot of times the black men will go out of their way to say these things. Whereas men of other races, we're not even having a conversation. Like, it's just two different worlds completely. And so when I highlight black men, it's because they are highlighted in my life and in my story, not because they're the only ones who have these ideas and perspectives. So yeah, I did not really believe or think that men would be interested in me or like date me because of colorism. But here's where I'm going to leave off. I still expected to get married. As I say it now, it's a really interesting phenomenon. But what I know now as an adult, that the younger version of me, like in middle school and high school, that version of me that like longed to have my own Cinderella story, or that, wanted to be the girl who like found the guy and then they lived happily ever after. There was a part of me that assumed it would just happen. Like that was something that all people just naturally fell into. Like puberty. I really thought like finding your mate was like puberty. If you just wait long enough, it'll happen. If you just live long enough, you're gonna go through puberty. If you just live long enough, you're gonna find somebody somewhere someday. And then I like went through puberty and graduated from college and got a few jobs, went back to get my PhD, bought a house, moved across the country. And it was like, oh, maybe it's not like puberty. Maybe it's not something that just happens if you live long enough. So where I am now, ... to be continued. So that was like a retrospective looking at like where I'm coming from, like the cultural context, the community, family context that I grew up in. Oh, one other thing that I want to mention, I need to go back and add it to the blog post, is that for a lot of dark-skinned girls like me, there are so many dark-skinned girls who have light-skinned mothers. And I remember like over the years reflecting on how like even men in my family, right? Like the first Black men who are supposed to love you and see your beauty, like seeing them as examples, right? As the first examples of what Black men want. And they're all choosing light-skinned women, or they're all choosing non-Black women, right? So that's definitely part of the early stages, our early context in terms of colorism and being single as a dark-skinned Black girl. So I have a part 2 in mind. Again, like I just finished writing the blog post for this, had like 10 minutes before I came live. So I can't say exactly what the part 2 is going to entail, but I do want to look more at like my current life, like as a fully fledged adult woman. And just kind of like continuing the conversation and seeing where people are at. I realize there have been a lot of comments I haven't read. So before I close out, let me make sure I'm not missing any important comments. Ooh. Black Knight 06 26.2 says the remake of The Fresh Prince has dark-skinned main characters. Yes, and that is on Peacock, I believe. And Dark Women Girls 365 says it's about the work, which is about solidarity and sisterhood. Who you with, sis? That's the question, whether you got a man or not. Oh, okay. Let them know. Who you with, sis? Whether you got a man or not. Yeah. Don't throw us under the bus just because you booed up now. Blessed to be a blessing too says, I am putting women in a box. Patriarchy is toxic as hell. This is my Kimmin. Black Knight 06 26.2 says, dark-skinned sisters, you are walking into rooms on a weekly basis and driving men crazy. You just don't know it. They are feeling you. Let's see. I guarantee you, dark-skinned sisters, you are walking in rooms and there's some man looking at you and saying, that's everything. Thank you, Modern Formalist, for buying a badge. Thank you. I really appreciate the support in all forms, whether it be financial or just your attention. Your time and attention is also a form of support. So I want to quickly comment on what Black Knight 0626.2 was saying about dark-skinned women being admired by men. Because I can't remember, I make so much content, y'all remember what I be saying and where and when I be saying it. But I distinctly remember writing about how, I can know that intellectually, right? That the reality is, it's hard to say that 100% of men would not find me attractive. I feel like, yes, on an intellectual level, you can know as a dark-skinned woman that statistically speaking, someone is going to find you attractive, right? They say there's someone for everybody, right? That kind of thing. But I also think that I don't know if it's social pressure or also an aspect of colorism or just, I don't know, the human dynamics where people are really quiet about their love and affirmation and really vocal and loud about their disdain and hatred. So whether you're a man or not, whether you're gay, straight, bi, poly, whatever, don't withhold affirmation for a dark-skinned woman. If you admire a dark-skinned woman for any reason, romantically or platonically, or you just like her hair or her makeup or her dress, her shoes, we need to stop withholding that affirmation, because you'll have a lot of, I remember one of my other friends, telling me how as an adult, guys would say, oh, I had such a huge crush on you in high school. But I was too afraid to say anything. And so she was like, do you know what that would have done for my self-esteem if you had just acknowledged that? And so I think it's unfortunate that even though what you're saying is true, the men who hate us are way louder than the men who love us. And that has to change. That is one of the things that has to change, is that the people who say they love us have to love us out loud. They do, because the people who hate us are hating us out loud. And so I don't think it's I even said I used to think, I don't like secret admirers. I think secret admirers are pointless. Like, what can I do with a secret admirer? Like, I can't do nothing with that. But it's true, right? It's like saying, oh, I have $5 to give you. Like, that's great, but until you actually give it to me, it's worthless to me, right? And so I think part of, just culturally speaking, anyone who loves a dark-skinned Black woman or admires a dark-skinned Black woman has to do it out loud, has to be unapologetic. And I think, was it dark-skinned woman in Girls 365 who said this? Like, doing that, like loving dark-skinned Black women out loud teaches other people that it's okay to do it, shows people that it's okay to do it. Because I also mentioned, like, years ago, this was a few years ago, I made a post on Instagram, it's in the archives, about how we don't just need pictures of beautiful dark-skinned Black women. We also need imagery and representation of people loving dark-skinned Black women. Because I know so much focuses on, like, oh, if you want to improve the self-esteem of dark-skinned Black girls and you want to reduce people's colorist biases, show them beautiful images of dark-skinned Black women. Like, that's important, but it's like you can see a beautiful image of a dark-skinned Black woman, but she's most often the only person in the picture. It's like we also need to see people loving on dark-skinned Black women. We need to see people treating dark-skinned Black women with kindness and care and compassion and concern and gentleness and tenderness and affection. We also need to see representations of that. Because I know for me, like, during the period of my life when I was, like, feeling the most depressed about being single, like, that was one thing I had to seek out for myself, was representations of dark-skinned Black women, especially those with natural hair, who were receiving affection, who had, managed to date well and find healthy relationships or happy partnerships. And from the outside looking in, you never know what's going on in somebody's relationship, but the representation was still important to me, right? So that's where I'm gonna leave y'all for tonight. I'll be back next week, probably talking about a part 2 of, like, the adult version, the more adult version of this. Not adult as in, kids can't watch it, but I just mean, like, during my adult years. And so leave your questions and comments. I'm really curious to know more. I know a lot. I'm sure every dark-skinned Black girl has a story, has their own story of this. And again, regardless of whether you date men or whether you date men and women or, whatever, there's a lot of our romantic dynamics are influenced by patriarchy, right? It's not just the heterosexual relationships that are influenced by patriarchy. Like, all forms of relationships have been influenced by this culture, and definitely been influenced by colorism. Definitely influenced by colorism. All people, regardless of their relationship status, that kind of thing, have to contend with their internalized colorism. All right, folks, let me read these last few comments, and then I really got to get off. The color in me, what's up, fam? Yes, that is so true. Let's see. Media teaches us how to feel about and respond to people. Okay, Court_Nico. The media teaches how to feel about and respond to people. It does. It does. Wow. Thank you, Dr. Webb, for the clarity, vulnerability, and being a healer in our communities. This is from Miss I.R. Robinson, Missy Robinson, I think that's how you say it. Thank you. That comment really means a lot. Blessed to be a blessing says we must overcome this cultural condition of dark-skinned Black women being marginalized. Yeah, we definitely need to overcome that. Thank you for your courage, dark-skinned women. We love you. Okay. Yes. Starting us off, loving us out loud. All right, folks, y'all have a great night. Thank you so much for joining me in this, like, new phase, or this, like, new milestone in my work on colorism healing. And I'm glad that y'all are like willing to go on this personal journey with me as well. And my hope is that by being vulnerable, by having the courage to open up a little bit about this particular part of my life, particularly how as it deals with colorism and my healing, that it does inspire other people, that it makes other dark-skinned Black folks feel seen, and also that it makes other people think, right? Because this is part of what we're all implicated in. We're all implicated in the stuff that I'm talking about, right? So whether there be adults who need to stop projecting onto young folks their perceived desirability politics, need to, get over their own colorism so that they don't tell their children to marry white men so that their kids come out lighter, whatever it is. Like, we all have work to do in this arena. But most importantly, I hope it makes another dark-skinned Black woman feel seen. All right, let's see. Hey, Lucid Los, will you do one for dark-skinned women in relationships? A lot of people claim colorism is only an ugly girl problem, or that it is only for desirability, but colorism is inescapable no matter your status. Yeah, I can do that. Although I will say my ability to do that from personal experience is extremely limited. So I can talk about it like from an analytical or social commentary standpoint, but I don't really have that experience. I can't talk about it from experience. Thank you, my Kimmin. Yay. But perhaps that's something that we could talk about as a group, right? So it doesn't have to just be me. Yeah. All right. Y'all have a great night. Love you. And I'll see y'all next Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Mwah.